So, herzlich willkommen jetzt hier zu unserem ersten Keynote-Programmpunkt innerhalb der vier Tage. Und das ist der Moment, wo ich jetzt hier ins Englische switche. And I'm really pleased to welcome Juan Carlos Monterrey Gómez with us. Happy to meet you. He's the Special Representative for Climate Change in the Ministry of Environment in Panama. And when we in Germany talk about Panama, it's every child comes into contact with Panama because there's a book, and in English it's called The Trip to Panama, and in German it's Oh, wie schön ist Panama, where a tiger and a bear are looking for this country. And move around their environment, coming back to home to find their happy place. So this is, Juan Carlos, the way where the people in Germany know about what Panama is about. But we invited you to have the opening keynote because after COP29 in Dubai, in Baku, Christine sent me a message saying, I heard this speech of this one guy from Panama, and you need to hear it, and we need to invite him to give him the stage to inform about the situation in Panama. So I don't want to make too much introduction speech, because for the next 30 minutes it will be your stage to present your view on what's happening there in Panama, for us to get back down and see what's happening in other parts of the country, and not only talk about our election problems that we have here in Germany. And afterwards we'll have the 50-minute discussions, including Christine and me, so to get to know more about your challenges that you have in your country. So Juan Carlos, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. 33 years ago, the world's scientific community raised the alarm. Leaders came together and adopted what we know today as the United Nations Conventions on Climate, Biodiversity, and the Certification of 1992, also known as the Rio Conventions. The promise was to make peace with nature. 33 years have passed, and what do we have to show for it? More words, more promises, but almost no real action. We have not only failed, we have failed spectacularly. The pollution that is driving the climate crisis has more than doubled since we adopted the Climate Convention. We are racing towards the mass assassination of half of all living creatures on Earth, despite the UN Biodiversity Convention that we agreed to in 1992. And land degradation continues to devour fertile land, pushing communities further and further into poverty. And what has the response of the international community been? More COPs, more meetings, more speeches, more declarations, while the crisis only continues to worsen. 33 years ago, I was also born in a small rural community called El Pájaro de Pecé, which is located at the heart of Panama's dry corridor. This is one of the hottest and one of the most vulnerable regions of my country. Also, one of the most deforested and with the most degraded land. Growing up, potable water was limited, power outages were frequent, and crop failure was the norm. I lived and grew up through the impacts of the climate crisis without even knowing what the word climate meant. 33 years have passed since we agreed to make peace with nature, and we have simply not delivered. So the question here is, why? We have the knowledge, we have the tools, we have the money, we have the science. And how come we have not been able to realize this global transformation that we need to ensure survival? And the answer is very, very simple. We're not there, and we have not been able to accomplish our global goals because of dark money and because of corruption. Over the past few decades, the fossil fuel industry and the extractive industry have polluted airways and media outlets with disinformation. But this is not the worst. They have bought and sold politicians in every corner of the way, and they have simply and plainly gotten away with murder. We have not succeeded because our leaders are more intended into raising the balance of their bank accounts than fostering the prosperity of their own people. I will not sugarcoat it, and I'm sure you already know this, but we are presiding over the destruction of our only planet. We are presiding over the destruction of our only breathable home. We're watching ecosystems collapse while we tinker around edges with half measures and empty gestures. This is not only a disaster of historical proportions, this is simply a moral failure. Making peace with nature is not an option, it is our moral duty. It is simply our lifeline. And yet, it seems like the systems that we have put in place and that we have created, both globally, regionally, but also in many nations, instead of solving these crises, the systems tend to become part of the problem. Endless processes, layers of approvals, countless meetings, and we have created a machine that is more focused on the procedure than the progress and the results that we need to be able to ensure the survival of our generations. This year, Panama is experiencing the impacts of La Nina. This is a phenomenon that for us brings more intense rainfalls to the Pacific watershed and disrupts precipitation patterns. While some sectors are celebrating the recovery of the reservoirs that provide water for the functioning of the Panama Canal, entire communities are facing floods, landslides, and crop losses. Amidst this reality, imagine a 7-year-old Panamanian girl growing up in a coastal community. Her education is constantly disrupted as the schools are closed due to the persistent rains. Her family, reliant on agriculture, struggles with soil degradation, but also with crop loss due to excessive water. For her and her family, climate change is not a technical discussion. Climate change is not a chart on a report. Climate change for them is the difference between being able to attend school or not. Climate change for this Panamanian girl and her family is the difference between having a meal or not. These are the experiences that reflect the reality of not only thousands of Panamanians, but millions of others living in vulnerable nations. In this context, the question really is, how do we protect their future in a world where climate action progress is simply way too slow? 33 years, dozens of climate conferences, and here we are, still stuck on this question. How many more years will we lose? How many more species will vanish while we go through another round of empty negotiations? Panama and the administration I proudly serve on is here to say enough is enough. We cannot keep following the same failed formulas and expecting a different outcome. The global system we have created to tackle these crises is not just broken, it is a fundamental barrier to the very action it was supposed to drive. Just starting with this craziness about decisions needed to be taken based on full consensus. If it is hard for a family to decide where to go to dinner at night, family of four or family of six, imagine how hard it is to decide for almost 200 countries on the same thing, on different paragraphs, on documents of north of 50 pages. It is simply impossible. And we as Panama believe that this idea of the consensus is what is driving the loss in ambition in all fronts that relate to the nature and climate agenda. Because simply, we cannot longer all get together and agree on common sense at the international and global stages. So, our ambition is to cut through the noise and get serious about what needs to be done. We do not need more frameworks. What we need are results and bold actions. This is why in May, Panama will present to the world its first ever Nature Pledge. And the Nature Pledge is a groundbreaking step that we're taking in order to push the unification of the international climate, biodiversity, and the certification frameworks into just one single strategy, instead of the three separate and fragmented strategies that we currently have at the global stage and further replicate at the national level. This idea of unifying our nature commitments into just one simple document, it is a very basic and simple idea. But as the system has been constructed internationally and replicated nationally, the idea doesn't look too simple because we have gotten used to a fragmented management of nature when in fact nature is just one big complex ecosystem that we need to address in a holistic fashion and not through fragmented strategies. This is not only the pledge of Panama, this is a call to action for other nations to also break free from this cycle of endless and inefficient processes and start delivering on real promises. If we do not change our course, if we do not act now, we will be remembered as the generation that talked the most and did the least while the planet was suffering. As Panama, we have also been able to lead and create a global coalition of more than 110 nations that are fighting for a global treaty to combat the pollution of plastics. Plastics is a great threat, not only to human bodies, but also to ecosystems. More than half of all water supply in the world is polluted by plastic. Every single baby, every single kid that we bring into our society is born and birthed polluted even before taking its first breath. So, what Panama has done through diplomacy and our environmental agenda has been to push 110 nations to declare publicly and with conviction that we will only agree to a treaty that, first of all, addresses the supply side of plastics. This means production. If we want to end plastic pollution, we must put a cap on plastic production. Additionally, we also want to put an end to the inclusion of chemicals of concerns in the production of plastic that is actually necessary for the operations of our society. And thirdly, we will need a financial mechanism that will sustain and push this transformation at the national level for countries that will require this additional economic incentive. We're additionally calling for a complete overhaul of the United Nations environmental agencies. They have become entrangled in their own processes. We need them to facilitate change, not slow it down. But these agencies that we have created to lead the fight for the sustainable future are trapped in their own mechanisms. Panama might be small, but we're always punching above our weight. We are a carbon negative nation, which means that we absorb more carbon than the total amount of greenhouse gases that we create as a nation every year. We have protected over 54% of our marine areas, and we have protected over 32% of our land territory. And we're currently working on the expansion of our protected area system to include at least 10 new more protected areas. And through the Panama Canal, the world's green route, we help cut global emissions equivalent to 2.5 million passenger cars every year. Panama is 100% against whaling. We are 100% against deep sea mining. We are 100% in support of environmental defenders because we believe that the best way to protect our nature is to fight for those that protect nature. The built environment also plays a central role in the fight against climate change and the preservation of biodiversity. In Panama, floods and extreme events have underscored the urgency of designing more resilient cities. That is why our administration has committed to not only assess but also disclose the risk of investments and the built environment as it relates to the impacts of climate change. This is why we have developed the Climate Risk Atlas. This is an interactive tool available to every Panamanian that is going to serve as the base of our territorial planning at the district level, but also as the base for our environmental impact assessment studies that we conduct at the Ministry of Environment and that are needed for any new construction or any new development. Through this atlas, developers, city leaders, and other planning officers are going to be able to identify at the neighborhood level what are the potential indicators that we have developed through the climate scenarios that will be able to forecast what are the temperature changes that we're expecting for that area by 2030, 2040, 2050, what are the projected changes in precipitation that we're going to be seeing in that area, and additionally, other variables that relate to the behavior of the climate. This is going to be essential as cities start to organize their territorial development and they become fundamental as we receive these environmental impact assessments that will also need to have a component on the products or results that the Atlas showcases for the area where a given development is going to be enacted. Additionally, we are committed to implementing stricter standards in sustainable construction. We're committed to developing nature-based infrastructure solutions such as mangrove restoration to mitigate flooding. And we're committed to streamlining climate adaptation and resilience to all of our micro projects. For example, there is a massive and the flagship initiative of our administration is to build a train that runs from Panama City almost to the frontier with Costa Rica. And in order to do that, we're currently analyzing what are all the future climate projections that we will have in the entire potential route of this train. Reducing emissions is not enough. We need infrastructure that is adapted to the new patterns of the new climate era. And this is why I am so excited to be spending this time here with the members of the German Sustainable Building Council. And that is why I am so thankful to Christine and her team for the invitation and the opportunity to speak here today. I believe that Panama is proof that bold action is just not possible, it is necessary. The time to act was yesterday. But if we still have today, we cannot waste it. The world is running out of time, and while others hesitate, Panama is ready to lead. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Juan Carlos, for this very inspiring introduction speech into our conference and giving us all the insights. So, before moving away to the zone where we also have the opportunity for participants to bring in questions, there's one first question just to make sure how important it is for you. So, what's the time you have in Panama so that you when did you woke up today to be here with us?
So I woke up at 2:30 a.m. To prep a little bit, and right now it's 4:20 a.m.
Oh my God! So each and everyone right in front of the of their PCs. He woke up pretty early, so please bring in your questions. We make a 30-second change here because with the stream we're a little bit also before the time of the participants. So we just switch a little bit, but come to you in 30 seconds. For all the other ones, just stay there, and Juan Carlos also stay here. We're with you in 30 seconds. So welcome back. In the last years of our annual Congress, we call this a backstage room because you have the opportunity to bring in your questions and to ask our keynote speakers directly what interests you. So each and every one participating, please use the Q&A tool for giving me and Christine the questions that you want to ask Juan Carlos. If there are no questions coming in, then we will just have a talk. And so thank you very, very much for your introductory talk. And it's very always special if someone does not presentate with any PowerPoint slides and so on, because you need to hear what you talk, and it becomes more intense. When I started to prepare a little bit the moderation, there was this issue that I read that in the end of May last year, this was the first time that people living on an island in Panama need to be moved to another place because of the risk of getting flooded. So 2 questions on that. The first question is, how was the response on that? How does the inhabitants deal with that? And also, does this situation give you any push in international in the international view on Panama, because it becomes so tangible that there's something to do?
Absolutely. So towards the north of Panama, we have the Gunayala indigenous region. This is a region where you can find almost 400 small, tiny, beautiful islands. And these islands are heavily impacted by sea level rise. However, sea level rise is not the only impact that these communities are facing. Since the late 90s, these communities have been requesting the central government for their relocation due to overcrowding and then the lack of government services in these remote areas. However, sea level rise have further exacerbated these problems that they have been facing for the past few decades. So the first thing that I would like to do is to correct that record, because when I came in as special envoy, one of the first visits that I had to do was to the traditional authorities congress of this community that was relocated. And their main concern is that the discourse about the relocation being so focused on climate change, to their understanding, had only benefited the international media. Why? Because the actual relocation process was a bit of the mess. And this was conducted by the previous administration. We just came in the past 7 months. So their traditions were not respected. The new homes and communities that was built for them was not in line with their cultural practices. So, in order to prevent these sort of messes to continue developing as the impacts of the climate crisis keep exacerbating in coastal communities, right now we have under public review the draft of the new climate adaptation national executive order. So, what this executive order, among other things, requests and does is that it will give us the power to create a protocol for the relocation of many communities that are going to be impacted by sea level rise. According to our latest estimates, there is from 60 to north of 200 local communities in Panama that are going to be facing potential impacts due to sea level rise. So what we're creating is a standard or a protocol that we can apply in every situation where people are being forced to be displaced because of climate impacts. So it definitely gives us the moral high ground at the times of negotiations. However, the moral high ground is really not enough to get international commitments and to get international action. So we are currently working closely with different government dependencies to ensure that this protocol does not only take into consideration the cultural norms of the communities being impacted, but it also takes into consideration the best science and technology for the design of the relocation sites that we're going to be identifying in the near future.
So here comes already the first question from the Q&A, and I would have it on my list also. Of course, when we talk about that, when we talk about COP and everything you presented, here in Germany we have also we are not really happy with what's happening in the US, but for you, looking on what's happening there over the last few weeks, is the fear growing that things are not happening?
So things have not been happening for a long time. Definitely, there is a fear that things will happen less because of the current geopolitical dynamics, and this is why we're pushing towards efforts that are more efficient, efforts that simplify action, and efforts that are not as bureaucratic as the norm and the current practice. So our response to these current, difficult times in terms of geopolitics is to further improve our efficiency, not only in terms of our national investments, but also the international resources that we procure and that we borrow for climate action and sustainable development. I do believe that the real action starts at home, even though for climate management, we need all nations and we need everybody to be on board. The first turf that you need to be able to resolve is the home turf. So even though the outcomes might seem a bit dark, I am very excited and very motivated by all the advances that we're doing nationally in terms of a regulation and planning for the bad times, because there are impacts that we're no longer going to be able to prevent. There are things that there is no way for us to stop. So what we're doing right now is preparing the protocols and the standards to be able to react in time appropriately, save lives, and also save assets.
Christina, you met or you heard Juan Carlos during the last COP, and you have been attending also a lot of other climate conferences, and you always came back disappointed. So why was Juan Carlos' speech the one where you say this is that gives you some sort of a point where you say we need to help or we need to work together more intensively?
Yeah, so thank you for your speech and thanks for getting up in the middle of the night for us. It's nice to see you again virtually. I found it it was a very, I think, special moment. I was at the end of the COP. I was there I'm a small, DGNB is a small observer in that whole COP circus Juan Carlos just described a little bit. And for many years, you go there and you're not part of the big negotiations. So you always sit then eventually in the big room and to listen to like all this political blah, blah, maybe so to say. And we hear that as well nationally. We hear that at the COP. And to me, that was a very hopeful moment because finally, it feels like, you go to these meetings and you're like, maybe I'm the crazy one, because it's like a lot of bureaucracy. And then all of a sudden, Juan Carlos kind of gave that speech, like 5 minutes. I think you overdid it as well with the time, but like everyone listened. And in the end, the whole room, like where the whole world is sitting, was applauding, and it felt like, I think, a moment of change that finally, someone speaks up, because I think especially like the smaller countries and the developing countries, they have tried to play along because they thought, that needs to be like that big bureaucracy and all these processes. And I mean, we see it on the national level, but as well when we work internationally, there's what Juan Carlos as well addressed, there's a lot of lobbying going on. There are many participants who don't want to change, and they're already very professional in playing that game, kind of like, yeah, we're the good ones and we want to support, but it always leads that everyone always has doubts and everyone is just talking about problems. And the other thing I think, we need as well to address as well internationally, and Juan Carlos, I don't know, you said the number, I cannot repeat it, but I think it's double, or almost 3 times as much the world spends in wars than the number it was about at the COP. And I think the US Army is excluded from the Paris Agreement. And, this is kind of like peace would be the fastest way to reduce CO2 emissions. And we would have so much money all of a sudden available for the things that matter. And that's what I found as well very brave, to address that, because it always feels like war, military, like all these things are kind of like off the table. Fossil fuels, they always try to influence and lobby. And now you see, which is from a German perspective is very strange, that all of a sudden nuclear is part of the solution at COP, like they have a booth and, countries starting to build nuclear power plants. And you're like, what are we doing? We keep on putting Band-Aids on a wound. This is already way too big. And if we don't start an honest conversation, I don't know how we're going to change it. So for me, it was a very hopeful moment in that crazy Baku COP environment, which was very funny, organized compared to other COPs. But yeah, so I hope, that you inspire a lot of other countries to follow your lead and to speak up, especially like the countries in the developing world, because I think the developed countries, they have all that internal bureaucracy, all that lobbying. So I think we're just going to get them moving if other countries go ahead, and that needs to be kind of a bit outside of the bubble of the developed world.
Mm-hmm. You have been at different COP, not only in Baku, but I guess when I read right, you were also part of the negotiations in Paris. How do you deal with the expectations that your people in Panama have when you are going to those different COP and you come back and all the expectations cannot be fulfilled? So how do you deal with this difference and going there with some hopes, but coming back with not too much of a result?
It's definitely hard, and it sometimes feels like a roller coaster working on climate and environmental sustainability at the global stage, and that's why I am so bullish about emphasizing the national work. Because if you look at the global level, it has been an open-ended conversation that hasn't closed, and it will not close anytime soon. So it is really hard to have a feeling of full accomplishment in terms of, professional outcomes for your nation or for the world, as the conversation just keeps running and running. So that's why I try to have, at the national level, concrete projects, concrete initiative, concrete programs and actions that gives me that sense of completion and that sense of success and that sense of closure. And if I were only to be dedicated to the international negotiations, I don't think I could do it. The way that I balance that out is that my portfolio, since I was a junior analyst and while I was in civil society, has always been a mix of international diplomacy and advocacy, but real on the ground execution, conservation, and all of that. Like right now, I am working supporting the ministry with this process to expand protected areas, to create a financial mechanism to ensure their management long term, creating this massive trust fund to provide loans and to provide grants to micro entrepreneurs and innovators on the ground living close to these protected areas. So that's the kind of work that keeps me motivated. That if I can at least, protect and take care of this piece of land that I call home, that gives me the power and the strength to then go out and act a bit crazy, like Christine described of my speech at international negotiations, because it does feel like we are the odd ones. It does feel like we are the crazy ones when in fact, more than half of that room is thinking the same way, but they have so many, barriers to be able to speak clearly. One benefit that I have is that I am not either a trained diplomat or a trained environmentalist. I actually study economics, very far away from both of these issues. So what I try to bring is, this macro perspective on how things currently are and how they should be. So yeah, I try to balance out international and national work to be able to have the stamina to keep pushing.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, but I think that is a very important message as well, to hear on the global level that there are countries already going ahead, because this is kind of what as well, like we have in Germany where it's like, it's again the COP, why are you going to the COP? Nothing will come out of it. So it's kind of, if people really wait for that like big breakthrough on the global level, actually, I don't think it will happen in that way, like you said. I think we need to change the processes. I think we need to kind of come up with another way of working together internationally and not try to get everyone on board and always have this fixation in the end on money when there are so many things, that could be done already on the national level. And I think that is a very powerful message, I think, as well to countries in the developed world, that countries like Panama are not waiting. It's not like, we're waiting until the rest of the world agrees. And I just hope that many other countries start to act like that kind of like that global level gets more pressure to get something done. But as well, maybe we take the importance away from this always like at the COP and then everyone is disappointed and the media, I think doesn't play sometimes a good role in overanalyzing things. And it's a very complex thing, there are very different interests. So I think that's a very powerful message to show what you are doing already in Panama.
You need to prepare for your discussion in 4 minutes. So therefore,
so I have to go. Thank you, Juan Carlos.
But you stay here for the next 4 minutes. And I would like to ask you, so now you're presenting at a conference from the German Sustainable Building Council. And so, of course, we're not representing the politics here in Germany, but nevertheless a powerful network coming from the background of the construction sector within Germany, within Europe. What would you like how would you like to have support or collaboration? What do you wish from us as a network? How can we help to spread the word or to work together?
So, Katherine Hayhoe, a top climate scientist in the United States, says that the best way to fight the climate crisis, to expand this platform of doers and advocates, is to keep talking about sustainability and the climate crisis. Because even though we feel that everyone already knows or that everyone has awakened to this reality, the honest truth is that the large majority of the global population It's so busy with their day-to-day. It's so busy with the things that they need to do in order to survive one day after the other, that they actually don't have time to think about these complex long-term issues. So my first request is to, number one, continue doing what you're doing in all different fronts of the business, evangelizing other people in terms of the benefits of sustainability and green construction. Additionally, talk to other people outside your sector. Bring your friends, bring your family. Don't be too pushy though, because sometimes when you're too pushy with these topics, people get turned off and they get further and further excluded and secluded from the movement. So the best way to support each other is to not give up. The best way to strengthen this global alliance is to continue standing for the principles that you believe in, that you know are right, that you know are backed by science, and that you know are fundamental and necessary for the survival of humankind and our society as we know it. So that on the very, visionary platform. On the second level, a more practical, I do believe that there is a lot of space for Panama to learn from sustainable construction practices in Germany and the wider region of the European Union. And I do believe that there is room for us to engage on conversations regarding a potential, memorandum of understanding or collaboration experience to share best practices and to be able to bring our top talent up to speed based on the top innovations that you have in Germany. Actually, my mentor from the government, she is a graduate of Munich Tech. My right-hand person at the ministry, she's actually a graduate from Dresden. So I have a lot of technically influenced people by the German education system close by me, and they are top notch. So I can only imagine, all the opportunities that we can have engaging with your platform, with your network. And they speak a bit of German, which also should help in all of this.
Okay, cool. So I guess this is very important also at the end of your speech and then the dialogue so we define concrete actions, and the concrete action is we should have a Teams meeting and define how we proceed in working together in terms of exchange of knowledge and supporting each other. At the very end, thank you so much for your time and for your impulse. I guess it sets the scenes pretty much perfectly for the next 2 days for us. So thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for your time.